Well, I don't want to just talk and bore everybody. Nick, where you at? Come over here too. You can at least lean up against this post, okay? We'd like to keep this as informal as possible and question and answer more than anything. The pieces here, she wanted them framed, so I think I had about 4 pieces framed. That's what I brought, 4 or 5 pieces. These pieces here and those 2 there are my pieces. All the rest of these around here, I think, are Keith's and Jeff Easley's are in the corner over there. I don't think Jeff framed a piece of art in his life, so, but that's Jeff. You'd have to know him. Jeff Easley, Clyde Caldwell, which he was invited here, but Clyde's turned into a recluse or something. But and Keith, Nick's father, and myself worked at TSR during the heydays of Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, it's still going on today. They still make good money, but during the 80s and 90s, early 90s, there was about 10 really great years there that the company was making as much money just about as World of Warcraft. And this day and time, the profit is a lot greater with some of these computer companies, I think. And working there was a great opportunity for all 4 of us. Everything we did was published, and you had an automatic audience, a very dedicated fan base out there. And so we couldn't help but develop fans and become popular almost overnight. The 4 of us realized at that time we had probably the best job you could get. I mean, we would sit around in the studio. We weren't vain. We weren't haughty or anything like that. We were very humble, actually. We would talk about how we were lucky, the 4 of us, to be doing work for this company, and the product's as hot as a firecracker worldwide. We knew it, and we appreciated it. And we knew that it wouldn't last forever. Nothing does. So, especially Keith and I, we started doing freelance work on the side, knowing that one day that the ride of that would be over and that we wanted to continue our career, and we were very serious with art. I know one time about 20 years ago, I told my wife, I said, if you was to compare illustration to acting, the movie industry, I said, I want to be a character actor, because character actors are always around. They're always making money. I don't care if they're 75 years old, they got parts in movies. They're always there. You might not remember their name, but you remember their faces. And I said, that's what I want to be, because I want to be in this for the long haul. I don't want to be a hot shot overnight. I want to make this a lifetime career. And it worked out. And but what I didn't know along the way, that as long as you keep working, producing, and especially when we all started the fantasy industry, the fantasy art industry, well, the industry as a whole, was pretty young. And so we did make a mark, and it got a lot more popular in the world than I ever dreamed of. It's almost scary at times. Because knowing the guys, we worked together, we were all just trying to make a living and have fun. We enjoyed art. We enjoyed painting. We came from different backgrounds. Each one of us was our own little star from where we came from in our schools and stuff, where we were outstanding students or something. And when we came together and started working together, we all got along really great. There's 4 completely different personalities. Actually, we had another guy. He was our black and white guy. He did a lot of comic book kind of stuff and inking and things like that. Jeff Butler was a great guy. And a guy, Dave LaForce, and was Diesel. He did a lot of the maps and stuff for the games. So all of us was in one large room. And we had a great time. Sometimes we had too much fun. And sometimes we got in trouble having too much fun. But you get, 6 artists together, even if they're grown men with children. And your dad was right there with us. He was a little boy at home. I've known Nick since he was a baby. Keith was like a younger brother to me. I was 10 years older than him. And we would get in humongous rubber band fights there at work. I mean, I remember one time somebody walked through and give us all these big, huge boxes of rubber bands, every kind of rubber band you could think of. Just put one on each desk, and we looked just like, God, you don't do that to a bunch of artists. It wasn't long till all of a sudden you're sitting there painting, like, you know, like, the rubber band bounces off your wet painting, you know. And hear Keith laughing like, God, you know. So I get a rubber band, and he kept over his light above his desk. He had a million little miniatures. Well, you shoot for the miniatures, lead miniatures. They'd go flying around. And then some guy over here, Butler, would shoot for my palette. If he could skip a painting rubber band through my palette and hit something, there was paint all over the place. So we got a humongous rubber band fights, and literally crawling between our chairs and seats at desk. And one time, since the studio was one huge room about like this, and one wall had big glass windows, and we were having this big rubber band fight one afternoon. I mean, it was lasting a long time. We was getting mean. And somebody looked up, or somebody said, cool it, guys, cool it, guys, cool it, guys. I think it's Clyde or something like, get back to work, get back to work. I'm like, what? He said, they're watching this. We looked up, and Lorraine, the owner of the company, had some Japanese visitors, business people, and they were all standing in the windows. And she was real proud of the art department. She always liked to show us off. They were standing there watching us. They were like, oh my God. You know, we're grown men, 33, 35 years. I was probably 35, 36, 38. And but we had fun. We really did. And some of these paintings, I was looking at some a while ago, but I don't think any of them are damaged. We would have big dart tournaments at lunch and stuff. And we were all competitive. And sometimes we'd lose our temper over a match and turn around, and behind each of our desks, we had most of our paintings at that time was on an illustration board. And you just push pin them to the wall. So behind your desk where you worked was just covered with paintings, the whole wall. You turn around and just throw your darts just as hard as you could, and right at your paintings. You'd be so bad. And most time, luckily, they would usually hit. There's usually a white border, on like Jeff Easley's on the illustration board. There was always like a white border around. And luckily, the darts would hit in the white borders instead of a middle, like a nose or eye or something in a painting. But we got that passionate about things. But we had a great time working together. And then TSR, the company, started changing some. The fun wasn't it was mainly the company. The company went through a lot of ups and downs. But Keith and I eventually left and shared a studio together for a couple of years. And then after that, we split, and he went to Pennsylvania and then on to Arizona and on to San Diego. I'm from Kentucky, so I went back to Kentucky and in my hometown, rural area, and built a house and studio, and I've remained there. So I've been freelancing probably now for almost 20 years. So, God, I don't even want to add up how many years I've been an illustrator. It's been a long time. But it's all I've ever done. I mean, when I got out of college, I got a degree, a BFA degree in fine arts, and then got drafted in the military and was terrorized because they all said I was going to be a tunnel rat in Vietnam because I was little. Back then I only weighed about 10 pounds. And so that terrorized me for a while, but instead of going to Vietnam, I ended up going to Germany and was stationed there, and I got to see a lot of castles and everything. I toured Europe as much as possible, taking pictures because I was really into fantasy art. And fantasy art at that time, we're talking about 70, 71, late 60s when I went to college. Yeah, I was there with all the hippies, okay. And but fantasy art was very young. I just read, when I was in college, I'd read Tolkien and some of the Conan series and stuff like that, Frazetta's illustrations. Really inspired a whole generation of illustrators. And what's so strange to me today is, like, I go to like San Diego Comic-Con where like there's so many artists there. Every artist that's an artist that's in the industry just about is there. And so many young artists. When I say young, we're talking about, I consider 35 and down as young. But so many young artists will come up to me and tell me how much of an inspiration that Keith and myself and some of were. It's like I can't believe it because that you turned out to be an inspiration in some other artist's life, because I was always inspired by artists that I looked up to. And so I finally figured out it's all one big creative cycle and circle. We all feed off of each other. I remember I bought a thing. I don't know what you call it. A creation of skulls and with some kind of animal skull. There's a sculptor with just a wild-looking piece of art. At a convention, I was buying it from a guy. I said, "Man," "that is so cool. Where do you get those ideas to come up with these?" He said, "Well, I got inspired by some of your art." I said, "Well, I've never done anything like that." He said, "Well, but you did something similar one time, and it just inspired me to do this." I said, "Well, I'm buying this because it inspires me to do something like this when I'm painting." He said, "It's just all a big circle. We feed off each other." And we do. We do. We all feed off of each other creatively. And hopefully along the way, I don't know if I've talked to all of you in classes, some of you I have, but it's about putting your own creativity and your own fingerprint on your piece of art. Because there's great painters out there, there's great people that can manipulate computer technology and create great pieces of art. There's great technicians, and there's a lot of great creative people. But for you to make your mark, it's in your own individuality, your own creativity, and your own fingerprint on your art. And always remember that. Be yourself, push yourself, be influenced by everyone, but come out as you and do what you like to do. And usually a good artist is always slowly changing. Hopefully that the paintings I've done, recently are better than the ones I did 20 years ago. And I can see a little change, but not like I'd like to see. And at the point I'm at now, I'm doing more private contract work and trying to get back and have fun with my art and loosen up and do some paintings that I've always wanted to do. Actually sort of change my technique some, or at least try to. Sometimes very hard. It's very hard to be free again. I was talking to some students in a class a while ago after we talked individually. It's very hard after 20 or 30 years of always painting something that's for a product to sell, marketing, and all this kind of stuff. It's very difficult to sit down to a painting now or to a blank board and say, I'm going to do something for me and have fun like I did when I was 19 and 20 years old. And put out of your mind where you're going to sell it, how is it going to do, what market will this fall in, what's this product for, and to clear your mind and say, this is for me because I want to do it. And that's been one of the hardest things for me to do the last 2 years. It's one of those things, I'll do it tomorrow. And I think it's a fear that keeps making me postpone. I keep doing work that has to be done or contract or something. And, well, I got to get this one. After this one, I'll do something for me. Because I don't want to do the regular technique, the regular style. I want to change some stuff. I want to play and experiment. And that almost scares me. So what I'm trying to say, even in your own creativity, it can come in a circle, a cycle. You never stop growing and learning. But it starts out when you're young, having fun. And most all these paintings that were painted the stuff I brought are mainly older paintings. I don't know the newest one here. I brought these because these were painted, most of them, when the time Keith and I were working together, or were still very close, or sharing a studio or something, or had just. I think some of these we just left. And he would move to Pennsylvania, I moved to Kentucky, but we were still riding the high then of illustration, of the TSR days. And but you start out young with a fire to paint and draw, and that fire never leaves you. But your creative juices are flowing, you're having fun, and then if you start making a living out of it, you got to guard from falling into ruts. You're making a living, you got to pay the bills, the kids are sick, the kids need a new pair of shoes, car payment, house payment, college, all this, and you're working your butt off, and you got to guard yourself from falling into ruts. So it's just getting it out and making a buck. But through it all, the bad jobs and the good jobs, the jobs where they give you freedom, the fire, the art in you, that creativity never dies. It just keeps growing. And if you're doing it right, you keep trying to learn and push yourself. And you get jobs that pushes your own limits. Like, I can't paint this, I don't think. And it's a challenge. So you face it, take it as a challenge and do the best you can. And after 30 years at least of being an illustrator, I'm at the point now there's nothing I want to illustrate. I was thinking that there's not a book I want to illustrate. There's not a game I want to illustrate. There's not a magazine I want to do the cover of. I want to do what I want to do, finally. I want to go back and have fun again. I want to push my art. I want to paint for myself. And it's still hard to do. You still have bills. You're still paying this. You know, as long as you're living, you're going to be paying electricity and all these things, insurance, you name it. So I still got to make a living. But I'm trying to get to the point where I can just have fun with art again, like I did when I was 19 and 20 years old. But with the experience you have now, hopefully I could do a better job. Yeah.
So do you get royalties?
Do I get royalties?
Yeah.
You very seldom get royalties off of art. The only royalties that were ever in the industry as a whole, as long as I've known it and been into it, the only royalties and good royalties that was ever paid out was what? Magic cards. Magic the Gathering paid the most royalties of any company I ever know. And I missed the boat, and so did his father. They came to me right after the company had been formed. Well, actually, Wizards of the Coast contacted me a year before Magic. Said, we would like to do a project with you. I said, what kind? He said, well, anything. Think of something. We need to make some money. They said, we'll send you a financial breakdown of our company. They did. And the company had $6,000 to work with. That's all I had in the bank. I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. Well, then the next year, I saw him at Gen Con. He said, you know, we got this guy. We got this game called Magic the Gathering. We don't know what it's going to be like, but we need tons of art. It's a card game. I'm like, a card game? And he said, yeah, and you know, we know you're a professional and stuff. We can't pay art, but we can pay you $10 a painting, small paintings, you know, for cards. And I said, well, $10, that's nothing. I mean, you know, you're doing covers, you're getting $2,000, $3,000 a cover. And I said, no, I don't think I can do $10. He said, well, we're going to give royalties and stock in the company and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, well, you know that never works out. A lot of these companies are fly-by-night. It's like a rule of thumb, don't take that. That's just a way of getting art from me for free because you're not going to see any money. So I said, no. So I can't do it. I think they approached Keith same deal, no. And so they got a lot of young artists trying to break in. There's some artists have been around trying to get work, and it wasn't that good. And the artist says, yeah, I'll do 100 cards for $10 a card. And they did. And they do 200 cards at $10 a card, or some for nothing, just to get published. I know one artist, his first royalty check, he bought a house. Okay? His first royalty check. You know, I know an artist that got paid when Hasbro finally bought Wizards. I think his check for the stocks, everything, was $900,000. Then he got another $90,000 check for Pokemon rights because Wizards was making that as part of the stock options. So on rare occasions, you get royalties, and the company doesn't screw you out of it. But most of the time, 90% of the time, it's a one-time payment. You're performing a duty. Now, what you don't want to do is sell all your rights. In other words, you have most companies I work with, their first publication rights. In other words, they're commissioning you to do a painting for whatever price, let's just say $3,000, $4,000, something like that. So you do the painting, they get to publish it, you keep the painting, and you got the rights to it. You don't publish it for a year or so. You can talk it over with them, but usually it's a couple of years. They got the rights to it. And they can also probably, like paperback books, they might wait 3 years and come out and publish it again, you know. And they got the rights to do that. Second rights means any other rights that you sell a piece for. Like, you know, used to you could sell to Europe for paperback books over there. You could get second rights that were always cheaper. Wasn't as much as the first time around. But a good painting, let's say this painting right here, let's say similar to that, could be the first time when you paint it, you got $2,000 or $3,000. Then you make limited edition prints off of it. It's a good, solid painting. It's not too illustrative. It's good. It's generic enough to where a lot of people like it. So you do prints, you do 1,000 prints at $45 a print. So you sell them out. So that's $45,000 that painting's made. And then you can sell second rights maybe a couple of different times. I think I've sold second rights down 2 or 3 times. And there's a few $100 in math, a couple of thousand there, probably all in all. And then you got the original, and the original to that, I don't want to sell it. It's one of my favorite paintings, so it'd take a lot of money to buy that painting. So let's say just ballpark $10,000 or $12,000 for the original. So that painting, if you get to do a good one of yours, and this is one I had freedom on, I did it for myself. And so a good painting can earn you a lot of money if you maintain the rights. Now, if they buy it, all rights. You know, if you make prints, you got their permission. You can't reproduce it without their permission. You can't really do anything without permission. And some companies like, sure, do it. Some are like, nope. I'm not gonna do it. And then like with Sony, Sony's a good company. They're nice people. But Sony, and his dad was the ones that first kicked off EverQuest computer. He did all the covers for EverQuest. Keith did. And then after Keith died, or no, it was before he died, but they contacted me. He was with another company starting something new. And they contacted me to do some EverQuest stuff. And but I knew from talking to Keith, they buy the original and all rights. They own it lock, stock, and barrel. And but they pay a lot of money for that. So a lot of companies know if they're going to buy all rights, everything. And a lot of toy companies, I've done some toy art and big toy companies. Good money in toy art, really there is, or there used to be. I don't know now. I did some stuff in my time for toys, and they pay big money. They own everything, all rights, originals. Of course, it's toy art. You're not so fired up about losing those originals, but the money is real good. But it's an example where they own it all, but they pay for that, so they pay extra. Yeah.
Like how much is a lot for all of that? Like when you said Sony, like
About 20,000.
Okay.
But you earn it. I mean, it sounded, I was telling one of the classes when they called me up, and I talked to Keith. He was tickled with the gig, right? It was good money. They called me up. I knew what he was making, and of course you got to act. You got to be cool, you know. So called me up, this is Sony. They said, yeah. I said, we thought you was probably too busy, and we didn't know whether to call you or not. But are you familiar with the, we know you're familiar with the EverQuest line. I'm like, yeah. So well, we're needing someone to do some of our paintings for the covers of basic EverQuest. And I'm like, okay, so your heart's like, this is big money here, you know. And I said, well, what does that entail? Is that all rights first? No, that's all rights and original. I'm like, oh man, you want all the rights and the original? In my mind, like, I'll be your bitch, you know. And so we just, negotiate some, and they said, well, they told me how much they pay. I'm like, well, let me think about it, Well, I hung up. I said, I'll call you in the morning. So we hung up, and I tell my secretary, she's jumping around the room, like, oh, God, we're rich. I said, well, listen, first of all, it's always a wave. You do this, and it's never going to last. It doesn't last forever. But if you can get 4, 5, or 6 paintings, that's great, because things change constantly in this industry. It's always changing. And I said, so we'll ride the wave. And so call him up, like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was like really thrilled to do it because it's really good money. But then I realized what Keith had told me, it's worth every penny of it because it's not easy. It's designed by a committee, seems to be, which is always bad because it's always too much stuff in it. And these were paintings or boxes sort of folded out. So it just means more stuff. And they're always changing stuff and moving stuff. And good thing there's Photoshop, and you do your drawing separately and put in layers, and you just keep moving things around, because they want this. Now we want it bigger. Now we want this one smaller. And we want this, then I'll take this guy and put another one in. Like, oh, God, yeah. So it takes you a month or so just to get a drawing locked down. And then you paint it. But all in all, it's and a lot of these jobs that buy everything and they're paying for everything are good high-profile jobs too. So they're worth it. Yeah.
You mentioned that you did that one for yourself.
Yeah.
What's an example of something other than the EverQuest? Like maybe you're eyeballs on something
Well, that painting. Let's see. That one, the one over the corner. and that one right there, were all Dragon magazine covers. And Dragon magazine was a gaming magazine that came out, I don't know, what is that, 30, I don't know, is that 300, I don't know how many years, 30 years, 20 years, about 20 years. And it ended. I did the last Dragon magazine cover last year. I was going to bring that painting, but I had to take it to a convention. It was I liked the painting. It was one I like. But for Dragon magazine back then, like this one, they said, want to do a cover? I'm like, sure, because they didn't have a lot of rules and regulations. They didn't tell you a lot. They said, well, our topic is clerics. Heal people, clerics. In gaming, a cleric heals people. They're the healer. You need them because everybody's always getting killed. A cleric can heal you, bring you back to life, and all this good stuff. And he said, so whatever you want to do, it's cleric. I'm like, okay, all right. And so when they give you freedom like that, and very low boundaries, you do better work. And so I thought about it, and the reason I like this painting, it's one of my favorite paintings I've ever done, because it seemed like when you're thinking about coming up with a concept for a painting, you get like a little snapshot in your head, the way I do. It's like a little, pew, I see it. Like, whoa. I can't hold it there, and I think about it, and I see it again. Just look like a little flash. And usually by the time you start working on the painting and developing it, if it comes out within 80% of what you saw, that's pretty good. Because the painting will take on a life of its own, too, and everything else as you're working on it. But if you can get really close to that image, it's like, wow, that's a pretty good painting. Well, this one was within, I would say, 95% of what I saw. That's the most successful one I've ever had the little flash and pulled it almost off exactly. And so it's been a favorite painting of mine, mainly because of that reason. And that's one of the reasons it's not for sale. The one back in the corner, that was a 200th issue, special issue, Dragon magazine. It was going to put a hologram back there where that dragon is at. So I had to do the painting with a blank magic circle without a dragon. And it was scanned, or transparency was made, sent to them. That's about before they did a lot of scanning. And when they published, a hologram was put in there. So when I got the painting back, I come back and put the dragon in. But again, it was fun because there was some freedom. They said, we're going to put a dragon hologram in there someplace, So, and this one here, this one I painted for myself. And I sent them a picture of it, and I go, I will publish it. So that wasn't even an assignment. I was listening to Lorena McKenna one night and just got inspired and just drew it out. And I'd photographed this model, little silly redneck girl. She was a really great model. She just got out of high school, and her attitude and the way she was, I knew she'd probably be pregnant by the end of the summer. She's a party girl, but for some reason you point a camera at her, and she was a great model. And didn't have a brain in her head, but a great model. And so I thought, man, so that summer I shot her 3 different times and just got great sets of shots each time. And so I went through these, and her hair wasn't hardly that long. And so I just drew that one pretty quick and just painted it. And so it's a painting that some people like or some people don't like. And a lot of my paintings, well, I think every artist will find out that some of the paintings he likes is not what the general public like. Sometimes the general public likes paintings that he doesn't like. The dark-haired one. This piece right here was one of the oldest. It was the first painting I did for a print. Keith had done a painting. We were going to Gen Con at that time. It's a big convention, and there was no artist selling prints. And Keith said, I'm going to do a painting and make a print out of it. And I think I'd done a little photo prints. And I actually done a print and sold quite well before I went to work at TSR. And it wasn't fantasy. It was more a rule-type painting. And I said, yeah, there's good money in prints, And so I was going to do it, but Keith, he did it first. He took it to Gen Con and sold a crap load of prints, And he didn't tell me how much he made. Finally, one day I said, I'm going to do a print. And I said, it costs about $3,000 to do a print, And I'm like, oh, that's a lot of money. He said, oh, I've done well. I said, really? I said, how much you made? Ah, I've done good. He wouldn't tell me. And finally, I just kept needling him. He said, well, this was like the first 6 or 8 months of doing a print. He said, I made over 10 grand off of it. I'm like, God! You know, to me that was like $40,000 back then, or 50. I'm like, golly, so I'm doing a print. And so I did that painting. This is the one with the little critter in it, or little guy, whatever he is. And I just sat down and just had an idea and painted it. And so next year, he and I both had prints for sale, done really good. And then we kept doing prints. We started sharing a booth at Gen Con and selling prints. And we had a racket going. We were the only artists there selling art, prints, lithographs. And we just raked in the money for about 5 years. And then other people sort of caught on. And so started chewing on our profits, you know. But we really had a great thing. We was making prints. But that was one that like this one, that one, and this one, and that one there, and the one next to it too was I had a lot. Well, all these I had a lot of freedom on. Maybe that's why they're framed in here. The one with the little dwarves. I don't know. When I played in role-playing games and stuff, I always played a dwarf fighter. That was more like my personality and statue and everything. And so this was a book on dwarves, and I'm like, okay, I come with this idea. But one of the reasons I'm keeping this painting is my son was about, 10 years old at the time, and while I was painting this, he was standing beside me watching. He was eating candy. It's called dinosaur eggs. And he'd take it out, it would change colors, and he'd put there'd be another color. I said, those are cool. So he had a box of them, so I'm eating dinosaurs, so we're both sucking on that, and we're taking them out, checking the color. He said, why don't you paint one of these in the painting? I'm like, it could be a dragon egg, right? He said, yeah. So we sucked on about half a box and lined them all up, different colors, and we decided to pick one out that was sort of maybe look like a dragon egg or something. And so I painted it in there and put a little dragon claw coming out, so they accidentally stole the dragon egg or whatever, and the mama's coming after them. And so it added a little bit more to the painting, the fact that there's a dragon egg there, not just a treasure. And so my son remembers that, and is doing the candy thing. So, and behind a lot of paintings are stories. One thing, paintings can almost document your life. When you did them, you can remember sometimes if the kids were around what they were doing and things going on, good things and bad things. Of Keith's paintings, I was looking at some of these. Now, he can tell you more about them. I can tell you some. I remember especially this painting here, the Dragonlance one with the Draconians. We were never happy with the Draconians, the way they were designed for Dragonlance. And I was sort of like the art director, I guess, of Dragonlance. And Keith and I sort of ran it, made sure everything was trying to keep some consistency to it, And Keith didn't like the way we were designed either. And we had a calendar coming up to do, a Dragonlance calendar, and he was going to be doing the center spread. And I said, well, there's two things, and he and I both felt the same way we talked about. We didn't like the way the Draconians were done, and we didn't like the way two particular characters had been done. And I said, well, he said, I will do them the way they should have been. And I said, oh, I'm sure you can, but I said, the Draconian is what I was worried about. So he started doing some sketches. I think the gold one, the main one, is one of the first ones he sketched, if I'm not mistaken. That or the guy up front there. And he fiddled around and doodled around and came up with that. I said, man, you nailed him. I said, I don't know where you got this at, but you nailed him. And so he did that painting, and I remember when he was going to title it, we couldn't think of a title. He said, God, help me title this thing. So we were all standing around, coming up with stupid stuff and trying to come up with titles. And I said, what do you think they're saying? What do you think's going on? He said, well, I can see this one guy saying, what do you mean we're lost? And I'm like, that sounds like a pretty good title to me. And so they kept on. I said, I think I like a title. What do you mean we're lost? I said, I think that's a good title. And he said, I do too. And so anyway, it stuck. And that was one of the favorite people. Keith was a natural colorist. Colors came to Keith naturally. I learned from him. And when we shared a studio and when we worked at TSR, we helped each other. I was good at drawing, he was good at color, and we would help each other out. And we all at TSR shared information, but he and I shared a studio together, and he would help me out with colors, and I'd help him out with drawing. And when he did that painting, it had so much atmosphere. It caught something, and it really woke me up in a way. It's like, man, I mean, we'd never done a painting out of there that had that much atmosphere and feel to it. And like, man, dude, you're on to something good. I mean, and he was young, man. He learned so fast, so quickly. And I don't know if the school done magic to him or something, but whatever. He learned quick. And I think he woke a lot of us up. You know, we were older and just sort of, we were doing our thing, you know, as a kids coming up. And then the kids started showing us up really bad. And like, well, we better get serious here. You know, it's kids kicking our ass. And he did. And he continued to. And there was even some jealousy that I feel in the early days of when we went our different ways with a lot of the artists. Some that stayed at TSR and went on. But Keith's paintings were so good. He was such a natural colorist and a painter that I think everybody had to say, that guy's friggin' great. I mean, no matter what. And Keith was a great guy too. Like I said, he was like a little brother to me. But he was a really, really good painter. And it's a shame we can't see what he would have done in the future. He had done some great stuff. But the colors came so easy to him. I mean, I look at the snow scene. I'm from Kentucky. That looks as natural. Take out the stuff. Take out the horse and rider and stuff. But the trees and the grass and that's real. You could walk in there, you know. And he was good at that. And without a lot of effort. You know, I did my snow scene here, and I mean, I painted my buzz off, and I was scared to death and didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I knew what I was trying to do, but I'm like, I don't know if I'll pull this off. And I liked the way it come out. And again, I think you walk into that scene. But Keith had a natural way of doing it. It's like, he didn't have to repaint too much. You know, that's kind of, this is not working. I'll glaze over this, or I'll change this color, because I paint in layers. You can always come back and just keep going. Keith would hit it on a button first time. Lots of time the color, he just put it in there, and it was like magic. Like, how did you know to put that crappy-looking color in there? You know, I asked him, I said, how did you know what color to use? You know, it's like a no-name git color, you know. And he just knew, and he would mix it up something on my palette and say, there, I think that would work, and it'd work. He could see color. It's like a gift or something. And the paintings, he always amazed me every time I see something new that he'd put out. Because after we went our different ways, I'd see him at conventions, and we'd have prints we'd selling. We'd see each other maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and I'd look at what he had new and like, holy cow, you know, it's just getting better and better. And he did. He just got better and better. And but he's the type, and he's known around. I don't know if anybody here does not know who he was, and his art still lives who he is. His art was known around the world and highly respected among all fantasy artists today living. Some of the best fantasy artists I know of today, Keith was their mentor. I mean, they admired his work because he was painting his colors his colors and the way he painted was just a notch above everybody else.
You mentioned that you paint in layers. I was curious when I was looking at the show. Do you
I paint.
use a lot of glazing, and what kind of paint do you use, and what medium are you
Okay.
using?
I use oils, and Keith also used oils.
But I mean, what kind of, did you have a favorite oil paint over any of them?
I bought all kinds. You can, stuff like Grumbacher is good oil paint, you know. I tend to stay away from, you got a lot of these companies putting out these hues anymore, like cobalt blue hue. Like, those are not good. They're a weaker, watered down something or other. But most of the company's been around a long time, you know, put out just good basic paint. Most of your oil paints, no matter what, it's going to last a few hundred years.
What about the surface? What about the surface that you use?
I think everything here except this one is paint on masonite. And the other one's painted on illustration board. I know that one's painted on illustration board. That's Keith. I remember him painting that. That is right. And that one's illustration board too. Why do you mean we're lost?
Yeah.
I think it is.
Most of them are illustration board or
Yeah.
masonite, like you said.
Yeah, we both used about the same thing. We eventually sort of switched off to masonite and stayed there. And the reason we went to masonite, we were painting with illustration board in the 80s, and technology happened, computers started changing it. One of the first things that changed, I got a painting back one day. I painted on illustration board. We sent it out to be published. I got the painting back, and I looked at it. I put out a little package, and they had peeled it. They could take illustration board, it's in layers glued together, and they had peeled it apart. So all my painting now was on a little thin piece of paper so I could wrap it around a drum and scan it. It was drum scanning. Technology had got to that. It saved them the price of photographing it and making a transparency. I'm like, God, they'll ruin this painting. It's on a piece of paper. Well, the other guy's like, too bad, so sad. And I was pissed. They just thought it was funny. Well, then I think Keith got one back peeled, and somebody else got one back peeled, and it wasn't funny then, And so I said, I want to start painting on masonite. They can't peel that, fellow. I said, let them try to wrap that around a drum. So I painted on masonite. Well, then pretty soon, different ones. When I started liking masonite, and then we complained so much. Some of them never changed. Jeff never changed the masonite, I don't think. I don't know about Clyde. I can't remember. But we threw such a fit, they stopped peeling them. But then Keith and I sort of stayed with masonite, Sometimes you go back to illustration board, but I like masonite. It's something I've been painting on for years, yeah.
What medium did you use to thin it?
The medium, I know Keith and I, for a while, all of us used about the same thing. We used, I use baby food jars. My wife's from a large family, has always been having babies, and have kept me in baby food jars for 30 years, okay. So I'd say save your glass baby food jar. So I use a baby food jar. In one jar, I put thinner, and thinner dissolves paint, right? It doesn't do anything for oils except dissolve it. So you keep that a jar full of that there. So when you're changing colors to clean your brush, you use the thinner. In the other jar, I'd put 2/3 linseed oil, 1/3 thinner, and about 6 to 8 drops of cobalt dryer. And that is my medium. Now, linseed oil floats paint. It doesn't dissolve it, it floats it. So basically, by thinning your paint down with linseed oil, or with the medium, which is linseed oil, I throw a little thinner in there to cut it a little bit so it'll help dry it, and then the dryer to help dry it. Because if you paint with just linseed oil, it might take a long time for it to dry. So by using that little formula, if you, like I say, use more of your medium, then your paint can spread to where it's like putting a clear or a colored piece of plastic. That's a true glaze. So you can take, let's just say this sky. Because I've done this. I had a painting I just did this on. I painted sky like this, and I painted something in here, and the sky was still too cold. It didn't bond too well with, I'd painted the other stuff a little bit too warm. Now, Keith would have never done that. He'd have painted it right the first time. So I still have problems, okay? And so, that sky needs to warm up. It's just too cold. And my secretary was like, yeah, I agree with you. What are you going to do? You got to paint it over? I said, no. And so I started mixing up a big old glaze I put up in freezer paper. You can buy freezer paper really cheap at Walmart or places. It's to wrap meat in, right? It's white paper. It's slick on one side. Best pallets you ever used. Cheap as you just roll it. You can buy the little strip pallets that cost quite a bit for little squares. Get a roll of freezer paper, you got 150 feet or something for $1.99, okay? And so I rolled out some freezer paper, got me some orange, white, well, and I think it's Naples yellow, orange, and white. A lot of medium, and thinned it out pretty good. I just got a big wide brush and started painting this like crazy. Just over everything. And she's like, oh my God, you're ruining the painting. And so, you paint, you get it all covered, and you take another clean big brush and you go over it again, a dry one. It starts pulling off some of the excess and smoothing it out. It's like putting a layer of orange plastic over it. And so it came out, all of a sudden the sky got totally warm and everything worked together. And you can do that with oils. You can do so much with oils, like magic special effects. Somebody said, do you use airbrushes? Like, no way, God. They're too much trouble. They're a pain in the butt. With oils, a lot of the old brushes, as a brush tends to, like a round brush, it loses its point. It starts to get a little fuzzy. Don't throw it away. It's great for trees. It's great for magic and special effects. They're dabbers. You can dab with those brushes. Like with magic, you put a color down. You can put it down fairly opaquely. Maybe it's a little bit thin, not too thin. Take a dry brush that's sort of fuzzy, and you just tamp it. It'll just buzz out. And you can make magic glows. You can put a blue halo around anything just by tamping this out with these. As the brushes get fuzzy as they wear away. So oils is capable of doing about everything you want. And by painting in layers, well, first of all, I'll start with the back, like in the sky. I always like to paint landscapes and people more than anything. And so most of my paintings are landscape and people. I start with the sky, paint forward. Sometimes because in skies you're using a lot of cadmiums and whites, and they tend to dry slower. So you know you can't finish your sky in a one setting. I'll rough it in the best I can. And then I'll start down at the bottom at the background, start working forward while the sky, it's good that the sky, if it is still a bit of wet, because you want a little bit of that sky color in with your background anyway. So you'll work it down pretty good, rough it in, and you start painting the background. Well, the next morning you come in, and your sky usually, it can be dry or 90% dry. And usually I'll leave it be and just go ahead and paint more of the background, try and work my way up to midground. By the third day I come in, the sky is bone dry. I come in, I finish it off, do all the details on the clouds, add some other color in it, and glaze or whatever you want to, tweak it all out, finish your sky. Then you just carry some of those colors, or if there's any glazes over the background, you just down and just keep working forward. And then pretty soon you're at the foreground. So the midground, the sky midground, usually I can get done in 3 days on about any painting. You can just really make good progress. And then you get to when you get to the edge of those trees, and the giant, it started to slow down. So everything from there forward started taking time because there's more detail and just more work. But I just keep painting forward, and like I said, my whole painting is an underpainting till I'm finished. With the oils, I just keep working. After I see something's not working, I just go back there and you can just smooth right into it, blend right into it, no problem. Oils works with you, not against you. I told one of the other classes, acrylic is a hateful medium. Gouache is a mean, hateful medium. It doesn't want to cooperate with you. It always wants to fight you. Oils can cooperate so much that you can tend sometimes to overwork and muddy your painting up. You got to put it down and let it dry, because you can keep fooling with it till you keep blending, and pretty soon you've got all one big mud color. So by painting in layers, stopping, it'll be dry in the morning. You can come right back over with something else or a glaze and keep pure colors and keep it crisp and just keep working. It's actually easy. It feels easy. Why don't you want to say anything about some of these paintings that Keith was working on? Yeah. Sure.
Talk to us about the signature. You have like a predominant signature, like you can see it in every single painting. Can you keep that? Like, does that print? Do you have to take that out when you print? Do you keep the signature? And, like,
No, I just sign every painting. Yeah.
And did you develop that, or have you always had the same signature?
Well, that's a little story in itself. When I was working at Fort Knox, we was all standing on this guy's desk at lunchtime and deciding how we was going to do our signature when we all got to be famous artists, And the guy the desk we were at, he's a very shy guy. He was from Naperville, Illinois, and but he's very witty and he's a good comedian. He could do jokes and cartoons really good. And his name was Dave, and I'm like, Dave, I said, man, you're a sharp. We've been signing all this paper ever, which I've been writing my name out longhand, trying to get fancy. Right? I said, you're sharp on stuff like this. I said, I need a way to sign my name that's be remembered. He didn't say anything. He just did Elmore. He did very precise. He was a good printer. He just extended the E's. I'm like, God, that is so cool. I said, I want to do that for the rest of my life. And I said, do I have your permission? I sort of cut up. He said, sure. And so I did. I started using that. Well, 10 years later, well, maybe not 10, 7 years later, I was at a convention in Chicago. I hadn't seen him since. You know, I mean, it was the next year I went to, or 2 years later, I think I went to work for TSR, and that was the last time I saw him. And in walks Dave, you know, and a friend. I hadn't seen him. David gained, you know, like 150 pounds. Everybody didn't recognize him. And he was into computer programming and stuff. And he walks up to me and says, I shake his hand. It's been great to see you. He said, all right, I'm here for two reasons. One's to see you, because we're old friends. He said, you got to tell this guy, his friend, that I created your signature, that I gave you that signature. He said, he doesn't believe me. He said, his best friend he wouldn't believe. He said, you're lying. And I said, no. I said, he did. And I told him the story. So it was sort of funny. But that signature, a lot of people has told me about that. And I was lucky, just the way, I guess, for meeting Dave and him doing it that way, because it's recognizable. It's a logo in itself. And I've had a lot of people talk to me about that. I'm like, hey, I didn't think of that. I mean, it's so simple. Why couldn't you? But just printing your name with that little. And when I first started, I did it really nice, really clean, you know. And then as the years went, I just kept signing it so loosely that I just started painting it like that when I finished the painting. Any question about anything, feel free to ask. But I was going to ask you, is there anything about some of these paintings you'd like to tell a story about and stuff?
Well, that's a good story. I remember that one right there with the sword. It was a book cover for a guy named Terry Brooks.
Yeah.
Series called Art stuff. And he really big in Pennsylvania at the time he was painting that. And it was, I don't know if there'd been some kind of big blizzard, but we had a lot of snow on the ground. And the whole rubber band fight attitude never really went away. And so even though I was a kid, I'd still get ambushed with snowballs and stuff. So I would walk outside, because his studio was built above our garage, and you had to walk out the back door to get to it. And I'd walk outside, and he'd be sitting there waiting, just quiet. And I was like,
He's a big practical joker, eh? He did.
And so one day I was like, I want to get him back. And so I went out there, and for like half an hour, I just kind of like compacted down. It was like a rock when I was done. I just waited for him to come outside, because he was in an office. And he opened the door up, and I was like, I knew he more. I just threw it as hard as I could at him. In retrospect, not the best idea, because he ducked, and it flew into his studio. And I was like, all right, well, I missed. And then he's like, wait a second. He turns around and screams. I ran the other way. But come to find out, I nailed that painting.
Just dead on, huh?
I don't know if you can still see it or not, but
a snowball mark.
Yeah, it was a snowball. I walked in, eventually he dragged me up there. He's like, look at this, and it was like stuck. So, yeah. But he painted over. It was water, right? And it's an oil painting, so it didn't do that much damage. It was just
Let it dry.
mainly the fact that it made it rock-like. Caused the problem. But that's also painted on masonite. It's very hard to damage.
Yeah, it's tough stuff.
And we did a lot. Like, I think the one with the shriveled up kind of old lady thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what.
I think
it was
it's
for
like
a calendar.
Work thing, yeah.
Yeah, it was for a calendar. Author named Piers Anthony.
Yeah, it's Piers Anthony, yeah.
And he was on one of those deadlines that Larry was talking about earlier. And he needed
I
to
remember
paint
when he
his
was painting
dry.
it.
His oil paintings don't dry very quickly. So he got the bright idea, we'll just stick this thing in the oven.
We did. We stuck a lot of old paintings in ovens.
Something that, they did fairly often, just not usually overnight. He'd been up a long time. And,
Yeah, it's plastic though.
so we got up in the morning, and we're like, all right, it's going to be dry, right? And it's bubbling.
It's bubbly? He cooked it.
We're like, oh crap, that's not going to work. And then we pull it out, and then it starts to harden and stuff.
Yeah.
And so you got these bubbles just kind of sitting there. We're like, what? So we had a bunch of pins and stuff, and just started popping. It was awesome. All fun, dude.
What kind of canvas was that? Is that?
I think he is on Mason Island.
Yeah. Jeff Easley, I remember one time he called me up and he said, man, I caught one on fire. We all lived. Keith and I had a studio at that time. He still worked for TSR, but we all lived in Lake Geneva. And I was at the studio one morning. I don't think Keith had got there yet. Or maybe he might have been there. But I know I'd got Jeff a little freelance. Jeff is a very shy person. That's why he's not here. And there's so many times where I'd show my portfolio to a client. When I got finished doing my sales job, I'd get Jeff's portfolio and do a sales job for Jeff. Get him work. Just extra freelance work because I always felt silly, but all of a sudden I'd take my own personal self and put a sales cap on and sell for Jeff. And so I'd got him some job for Monogram Models. And they'd have bad deadlines. Always seemed like. And so one way that when you got to ship a painting and tomorrow morning it's got to go out FedEx, and you're painting on it that night, trying to finish it up. Then what we do, you open the oven door and prop the painting up, and let the heat of the oven just get it warm. By heating it and cooling it, it'll dry quick. And so Jeff put one in the oven, sort of like that. It was on illustration board, not masonite. And it caught fire, I reckon, and they put it out, and he had to touch a lot of stuff up. Like, I don't know what you do when you catch one on fire, man. And I found out the secret, and during the summertime, I did this for years. I've probably done brain damage to all my family and stuff, but you could go out like in a hot summertime in the back of a car, the back window back there. You open the car doors, you open the car when it's all been closed up, it's 130 degrees in there, right? I mean, it kills people if you sit in a car like that. You slide a painting back there in that back glass, roll everything up, come back 2 hours later, and that sucker's dry. It just sits there and bakes it. And you're not going to catch it afire. It's just about right. And so I know Toyota, Keith and I used to put paintings when we lived there. We had that one studio. We'd rent that old Toyota and slap paintings in there, and they'd dry during the summertime like that in a couple of hours. But the bad part is you pick your family up, and they're like, God, what is that chemical smell? We've been drying paintings all day. Cobalt dryer, everything else. I mean, all kinds of chemicals. So I don't know. It's where my whole family's not a little touched, from all that. But there's a lot of stories, horror stories, and funny stories.
That was his work?
Jeff Easley's work's the one that caught. He's the one that got caught one on fire. But
Larry, a lot of these folks have to get to the next class.
I understand.
Sorry, we're going to have to wrap up.
Sure.
But if anyone wants to stick around and ask questions.
I'll take the bird.
My teacher did, so.
And one other thing I'd like to add, if you look at some of these paintings, Keith and I painted sort of similar as far as more opaquely. Jeff painted extremely thin. Lots of times the light of his paintings is actually the white of the board. He painted almost entirely in glazes. He didn't use much paint. I bet a tube of paint lasted him 5 years. Whereas Keith went through more paint than I did, and I was somewhere in between the two. But Jeff painted extremely, extremely thin, and he still does. So, anybody got any questions? Anybody wants to stick around? If you have to leave, go ahead. We're here for you guys. Yeah.
Your sketchbook. How often do you sit down and just say, "Hey, I'm going to sketch for a bit"?
Not near often enough. Not like I should. Not like I want to. Actually, it's something that seems like when you're home, you're always working on a job. You don't get to sketch as much. Everything's got to count. Everything is work. And so sitting around having fun sketching, you don't get much of a chance to. I know a lot of young artists, this professional artists, they still do a lot of sketching. As life goes on and gets more complicated and time is more of an enemy and time is more valuable, you do less and less. I know an artist that would take, everywhere he'd go, he'd take a sketchbook with him. And like what I should have done is like take a sketchbook with me on trips like this. When I'm away from home and I can't paint or work that way, then I should sketch like this. It really helps your creative juices keep flowing, and it's like staying in shape, like an athlete or something, like a little practice, a little exercise. And it's something you should always do. But I've been very guilty of not doing it like I should. who was it? Like L.A. Williams carries a sketchbook all the time. He's got some great sketches in there. And I look at that and I'm like, God, I should be carrying a sketchbook all the time, you know. Just little things, a little thought hits him, and he does a little doodle, and a lot of those became paintings, good paintings. But it's those little, all of a sudden this little thought comes through, and you think, I'll remember it. But if you sit there and start doodling on it like them, sometimes it expands into more than what the initial thing was. And there's great ideas come from that. And like I was telling one of the students, I've got several sketchbooks at home, blank. Really nice ones. Oh, this is so good. I will draw on this one. Sitting on a shelf collecting dust. I need to start bringing them with me wherever I go. On plane flights, everything. It's important, and I'm guilty of not doing as much as I should. Any other questions?
I heard last night when you spoke to us on the 7th floor, you were talking about teaching a girl who figured out fairies.
Yeah.
You teach. Where do you teach?
I give a class. I'll give a couple classes a year. There's a place about 50 miles from my house, 45 miles. It's an old bed and breakfast. It was, I think, Abraham Lincoln's uncle or something helped build it, or I don't know. It goes back a long way, and it's a very rustic place. It's got real pretty grounds around there. And so I take about 10, 12 students, and we take over the place for a week. And we paint all day long, and sometimes up in the night. But at night, like I said, we take over the place. We just drink beer, play games, talk about art till 3 in the morning, and try to get up and try to paint the next day. And we do this for a week, and it's a blast. And I would sometimes a drawing class and then a painting class. And we've been having a drawing class in the spring for the last 2 years. We've gone to France to a bed and breakfast there, like it's an old chateau out in the country in the Tuscany area. And again, we have a blast. Not a whole lot of art there, though. There's more touring and going to castles and medieval villages, so that's a lot of fun. But then at night, we drink a lot of wine, play some games, and talk about art and have fun. But now the class in Kentucky is more of a serious class, and we do get stuff done. The ones in France is more touring and party and fun. I'm going to be announcing probably a drawing class in the spring pretty soon. On my website, if you join the mailing list, then we send out all information like that, or we will announce it also. It's usually first come, first serve. You know. I enjoy it, but I tell you, if really seriously trying to really teach is really tiring too for a week. I mean, I'm worn out. I mean, what I do is try to give. We're all working on the same thing. I'm painting it along with the students. I paint so far ahead. They watch, and I try and watch them do the same thing, and then I do back and forth, try to get it done. And especially for people that's painted a little bit, and for people that's just getting started, it's like, get used to oil paint. Here's what you can do. Here's one way of painting. It's pretty quick. Sort of the way I've painted for years, and it can be, you can carry it farther and farther. The better you get at it, the more you can do with it. But this is basically what I do. This is basically painting on layers. And so this year we're trying to have what the students call an advanced class. They want to finish one totally out with all the details. And so I'm having to prepare everything beforehand so the first day they start painting. And try to get through the whole thing. Hope we can. But they're fun. They're a lot of fun, the classes are. And the drawing classes are a lot of fun too. I also bring the models in every time, at least one day, and I show people how to shoot a model. Because a lot of people shoot models a lot, and usually they can't use the photos. Seems like for some reason the model they shot will not fit into the scene they're trying to paint or draw. It just don't seem to work. Why is that? So we go over all that and show you how you can photograph people, what works in your drawing, and why it doesn't work. Why when I shoot you like this, and I want to do a painting of you sitting on the hillside just like that, it doesn't work. And it won't work because distortions in the camera, perspective, all kinds of problems get involved, and I actually show you what to do. And then after I do that, then we all get the photograph. I always bring some pretty girls, a couple of them. It's always fun. Got to have fringe benefit. Some pretty girls end up models for us the rest of the day. So we have a day of just photographing models for your own use, whatever you want. And but it's always a fun class, and I look forward to it every year. Got one coming up October the 4th. Not that far away. Any other questions about anything?
Do the paintings that you have more freedom with take you longer or shorter with ones that are, say...
I'd say usually it takes me shorter. Because I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. I know what I want to do. I'm satisfying myself. And usually they're better paintings. When you're working for a client that's really commissioning you to do something that you don't really want to do to begin with, and usually they'll design it to a point if it's not the best painting in the world to begin with. Your heart is not in it as much. You're just trying to do them a good job to get it done, because your name is going to go on it. And but something you're really into and you really enjoy seems to go faster, or either because you like it, it don't bother you so much. I know there's paintings I don't like. I'm working on it, it's like, oh God, I worked all day. It don't seem like I accomplished anything. I hate it. Maybe it's because I'm hating it so bad it seems like time is dragging by. I don't know. But there's a big difference when you like something and it's yours and you're enjoying it, and there's something you don't like to do, but you got to do it. Got to pay the bills. For that privilege of being your own man, your own boss, in your own studio, and you're a freelance illustrator, then you got to pay the dues. You paint a lot of crap that you hate, and long hours and all-nighters, and so it all bounces out to just reality. Yeah.
How does your family react to the hours that you sink in? I have
just
2 children and a wife, and it gets really hard to find the time to do schoolwork. So
My wife was always accused me of being selfish. Our biggest arguments is like, your art's always first. Like, the art pays the bills, hon. The house you live in, the food we eat. Okay. If I don't work, we're going to move to a trailer next week. Okay. It's been that argument. But I also married a woman, good and bad. She's not needy. If anything, a lot of artists end up being more emotional based than the normal guys. I always envisioned, you're a romantic, you're passionate, you love life, you want to live it and do blah, blah, blah. You want to do everything and paint too, which is sort of a stupid concept because everything's time-consuming painting. But that's what you want. And I've still tried to do it. My wife is very logical, very down-to-earth. She doesn't want to go anywhere. She's not a romantic, doesn't have a romantic bone in her body. She is total opposite than me, which has caused problems on my part. Like, I'm friggin' leaving. I can't take this cold woman anymore. I'm out of here. I think if I left, I'd probably starve to death because I'll be running around. And so I'm back. And she's like, well, I thought you'd be back. Now, you got stuff to do. So it depends on who you marry that can make or break it. Of all the artists I work with at TSR, all of them were divorced but me. And I've tried twice and couldn't do it. And that's not something to brag about. That's not good. But our lives are different. And we think differently. We pursue things differently. I think the reason my wife and I are together, we're both the oldest of families. We grew up with a lot of responsibility and obligation. And we looked at our marriage as a responsibility and an obligation to our children. And we did it. We stuck it out. The kids are grown. I'm like, hey, I think a lot of this obligation crap's done, okay? She's like, we got grandkids. Obligation, responsibility. They're like, oh, God, did it ever end, But that's life. And I think I wouldn't have been successful as what I have been if it wasn't for my wife. That's a fact. And so, all this you better not put on that part you can edit. She'd probably shoot me. But I'm just giving you the facts. It's all art is your life. It's not a piece of your life. It's not just an occupation that you leave at 5 o'clock. I mean, if you're really into art, you're eat up with it. It is your life. Remember the movie The Piano? And the one scene where he cut the fingers off the girl? That was the most horrific thing I ever seen in my life. It's like you took her art away. I mean, it's like you take it away and you're a shell. You're lost. You don't know who you are. You can't take it away. And no matter if I never make another penny at it, or I end up living under a cliff, I'll be drawing on the wall or scratching in the dirt. I can't help it. It's what I am. And so, I've asked my wife, why have you put up with me? Well, we're in this together, And because I could have lived with me for all these years of the work. She's had to live like a divorced woman almost. She takes care of the house and everything because art is so time consuming. And if you look, I have produced tons of art. 2/3 of it's probably not worth a crap, but I've produced tons of art in my lifetime. I know people say, you've been very prolific. Yes, I have. But I've made a living and kept a certain standard for the family and done it all. And luckily it didn't kill me. It almost had a couple of times, but that's the reality side of things. But art is something you just don't. I think if somebody was telling me, well, an artist that's painted all his life said, well, I quit. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm like, how can you? I mean, that's impossible. I don't see how people can do it, and some people have done it, but I don't know if they're that serious to begin with or what. But I think that a lot of people, you'll see people frustrated in the world that were very creative, but they didn't, either family or choices they made in life, are doing stuff that's not creative at all. And they're sometimes very sad or angry or hateful people because they're not happy with what they do and with their life. And but a lot of people, if they can do something creative or a hobby that's creative, it helps to utilize that part of your soul. Creative people are different people, and you got to express your feelings or yourself or something in some way, and find a way to vent it. So if you decide that this whole art world is so crazy and things are so screwed up, I don't know if I want to go into it. After all, the reality is not what I thought it would be. Find something creative to do with your life. Be happy. Feed that side of your brain. Someone have a question over here?
When you were growing up, was your family religious? Did it have a really big impact on the way you painted, and if they encouraged you to paint in your art and that kind of stuff? Were they pretty encouraging as far as that?
Religion's been a big problem in my life. I grew up as fundamental Baptist as you can get. Okay, hell, fire, and damnation. My father was a deacon. I'm in rural Kentucky, right smack in the middle of the Bible Belt. But the old-time religious people, they viewed your creativity and imagination as a good thing. It took the modern Christians, those like creativity is a bad thing. You paint a dragon, you're going to hell. The old-time people, like my grandmother and my father's generation, like, you paint a dragon? That's cool. How'd you think of that? You got an imagination. There was not a fear that seems to be today. But because of a very, I grew up as a fundamental religion. In other words, if I was Muslim, I would be the type that you could talk me into strapping a bomb on my butt and being a suicide bomber. I've never Baptist that hardcore, okay? I know some. If the preacher said, God told me that you need to blow up something, they would go do it. So on both sides of the fence and all this religious stuff, there are fundamental, hardcore people. I grew up pretty fundamental. But as an artist and a creative person, I didn't see things in black and white. I can't see things in black and white. I see it in shades of grays or shades of colors. I had questions from the time I was a kid about it. Of course, my dad solved it by read the Bible. He'd get the Bible, answer any question I had. I said, but that's not the point. I want to know what you think about it, what reality is. Here's the situation I'm in. And so it's been a problem I've dealt with. It's never stopped me. It has influenced me. I've held back on things because of that, knowing there's just people that I knew that I would offend. And the Bible says don't offend your fellow and stuff like that, your fellow Christians or whatever. So it's been a problem for me. And a lot of artists, I've been in great religious discussion with artists. One of the best ones I ever had was at art class. We had fundamentalists, we had atheists, and we had one guy that was raised up Jewish and Catholic, both. That sounds impossible, but he had both sides of the fence. We had great religious arguments, or discussions, not arguments, actually discussions, all night long. And a lot of artists has problems if you grew up in a very fundamental or very rigid religion. It can really impact your art, and because creative people, the creative side of your brain, let's say the right side of your brain, doesn't deal with right and wrong and logic. It deals more in emotion and space and intuition and things that there's no rules to. That's what gives us our creativity and our ability to go beyond, to break the rules mentally or visually. And so it's hard to make that side of the brain work with the rigid of a very rigid religion, within the rules of a very rigid religion. And so I've had a lot of internal turmoil in my life, and I've decided as I got older to be me, and hopefully that God is a greater God than we tend to. Most religions, a Baptist. I'm still a Baptist. I'm also a rich Republican, but I vote Democrat all the time. So I split a lot of. I tend to do what I feel like I think is the right thing to do at the time. And one guy that grew up a lot like me is also an artist, but he had the same religion kind of deals. He'd done a lot more reading. I stayed too busy being published, and he wasn't published as much, so he had a little more time to read and study. One thing he said to me one time, he said, which really touched something, because I'd questioned religions and looked at a lot of different things, and he had done a lot of reading. He said, Larry, he said, look at it this way. He said, what if you had 10 children? He said, you got kids, you know how much you love a kid. Loving your child is unconditional love. You love them to the bone. Until you have a child, you don't realize what it is. And a parent's love and a child's love is special. So if you had 10 children, and they all loved you and you loved them, right? He said, God is our Father. Yeah. He said, what if each child loved you the best they could, but in different ways? Because they only knew this way to love you, and this one only knew this way to love you, and this one only knew this way to love you. But they practiced their love to the best of their ability. Do you only choose one child and his love and throw the others out in the street? He said, when they're all sincere. I said, as you as a father, would you do that? I said, no, you couldn't do it. He said, well, think about that. And I did. So it's like, maybe we tend to, especially in fundamental religions, or a lot of broader religion, tend to, instead of looking at God as a creative power that's beyond our comprehension, we tend to make God fit us. When we paint God as an old man with long hair, we humanize something that can't be human. And so, are we constantly creating God in our image? I think we do. I think we have from the beginning just about, because we can't comprehend something that large. But we're a product of our environment. We're a product of our teachings. And to go beyond that sometimes is difficult. Some people toil with things, and sometimes bad things happen to people in life that they can never get over, and sometimes people grow on past it. So each person has their own demons to fight. I was the kind of person, very young in my life, I decided, I always looked at my brain up here like a big old house with a lot of closets and a lot of hidden spaces in a basement and a cellar and an attic. And there's monsters hidden all in there, little monsters, some. But I always wanted to go in there and grab every little monster. I'd open every door and crawl under every bed and try to find him and drag him out in the sunlight to see who this monster was and why did you affect me or scare me or make me insecure or feel inferior. I mean, I grew up all my life. I was the littlest guy in high school. I weighed like 100 pounds when I got out. And basketball was our school's sport. Me playing basketball, So I decided, they go play basketball, I'll flirt with the cheerleaders, okay? But I started taking a different attitude early on and trying to find my demons. and fight them. And then I was a very insecure person for most of my life. But then I had to go to college. I got out of college. I got drafted in the Army. Went to the Army. During the days of Vietnam, when if you wore a green uniform, they'd spit on you and give you the finger as you walk down the street. So I've sort of endured a lot of that. And so then I finally got to the point I had nothing to lose but everything to gain. And nobody cares but me. If my art's good or who I am, when it gets down to it, nobody cares but you. Your wife, if it comes to a struggle, she will take care of herself first. You know, it's really, this world is every man. You can love people and help the best you can, but it's you. And so I started becoming more confident. I mean, little things used to intimidate me. Now nothing much. I'm almost too relaxed because my wife and my daughters and I'm like, Dad, just don't be talking to everybody and don't embarrass us. But I feel comfortable in life, and I like it. It's a lot better feeling than to be insecure and worried. And after you do some, I think when I did accomplish things I didn't dream I could, that helped build my confidence too. But we all still have our demons we struggle with and problems I still deal with. I don't have answers to it. And some things can't be answered, I don't think. So somebody asked me what my favorite quote. I worked with this old Mexican guy at Fort Knox. He'd say, do your best and guess the rest. He always had that for everything. He said, do your best and guess the rest. On a painting, do your best and guess the rest. And life's sort of like that. You know, you do your best and just sort of guess the rest. You know, until you learn something, then that goes as a tool in your toolbox to help do your best. I think you keep putting tools in your toolbox. So when you have problems, you got more tools to work with. I know one time I said, I don't know if I see a psychiatrist. Not him. I said, yeah, you should. So why? He said, you might get some more tools to add to your toolbox. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you got so many tools to handle your problems with. Any problem in your life, from art to whatever, you got just X amount of tools. He said, some people with their toolbox, they got a screwdriver, a hammer, and that's about it. You know, and they don't even try to get any more tools. He said, I believe you should get as many tools as you can. He said, going to a psychiatrist to deal with something. This is one time my wife and I were having problems. And I thought, well, it's all my fault. It's got to be. Because she was telling me I was crazy, so I figured I was. I mean, who's most likely to be, the sane, solid person or the artist? The fan? So it had to be me. And but he did. He gave me more tools that I didn't have before to analyze myself, my art, my family, my relation that I didn't think about. So I put those little tools in my toolbox. And it helps you keep growing and learning in life. And I'm a firm believer that make life fun as you can, because there's going to be enough shit that comes by no matter what. There's going to be deaths and sickness and bills and crap. It's going to always be there. But try to enjoy it the best you can, because you don't know how many years you got. And I thought I wouldn't live the way I lived. I didn't think I'd live to be 40. Clyde Caldwell used to say, you'll never make 40. When I was 40, he called me up. He said, well, you made 40, didn't you? Yep. And at 41, I had a stroke. So I barely made it. And then I had some heart attacks and stuff. But I don't think about it. I enjoy life. And I try to do the best I can, then I turn around and enjoy life too at the same time, and the pleasure it has. So try to have fun. And with me, art is fun. It's one way of having fun. And everything can't be all fun, so even art has got to stay on sides and problems too. It's a challenge, but it makes life interesting, I guess. Any other question? I know I'm probably bored everybody to death. Keep talking. I told Sarah I could talk to a wall. She said, there might be times you have to talk a long time. I said, I can talk to a wall, man. But if there isn't any questions about anything.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.